The night was a tapestry of secrets, its darkness woven with whispers of fate and forbidden desires. Imagine riding along a lonely road where every crunch of dry leaves beneath your tires echoes like a heartbeat lost in time. The moon, veiled by a heavy curtain of clouds, barely offered its gentle glow, leaving you suspended in a realm of mystery and isolation. In that moment, as the bitter taste of solitude filled your mouth, you could almost feel destiny nudging you forward, urging you to confront the shadows that lurked just beyond sight. This is not a tale of ordinary nights or simple rides home. It is the beginning of an odyssey that blurs the line between the human heart and the wild, untamed spirit of the night. Scarlet, our restless protagonist, found herself trapped in a life where every decision felt dictated by an unseen force. Her journey was marked not by the gentle cadence of routine, but by the raw, unyielding pulse of emotions that surged like a relentless storm through her veins. As she sped down that narrow, desolate path, each turn and every gust of cold wind intensified the quiet battle raging within her. It was a battle against the isolation that had seeped into her bones, a fight to reclaim the fragments of a shattered soul. The chill of the night air mingled with the familiar scent of pine and damp earth, a bittersweet reminder of memories long past. And yet, amid the cold and the silence, a low, guttural growl stirred the air, shattering the stillness like a harbinger of change. In that split second, when the sound of snapping jaws pierced the night, Scarlet's heart thundered against her ribs, mirroring the wild rhythm of the forest. It was as if the very essence of the night had chosen that moment to reveal its dual nature, a blend of beauty and brutality, of passion and pain. The stage was set for a transformation that went far beyond the physical. It was a metamorphosis of spirit, where the fierce call of the wild met the tender, fragile beats of a human heart. In a flash of instinct and adrenaline, she abandoned her bike and embraced the primal force within her. The familiar burn of transformation surged through her like liquid fire, tearing through the constraints of human form and heralding the arrival of her true self, a majestic creature born of moonlit legends. In that moment, as her senses sharpened, and her very being expanded into the form of a white wolf, the world around her transformed into a vivid canvas of heightened emotions. Every scent, every sound, carried the weight of life and loss, of battles fought and dreams deferred. But even as the wild power coursed through her, a deeper, more haunting mystery tugged at her soul. The memory of a silver bracelet, the last memento of a mother long gone. This simple, unassuming piece of jewelry held a profound significance, a tether to a past steeped in love and pain. It was a silent promise of continuity in a world where nothing seemed certain, a symbol of a bond that defied the passage of time. Yet as Scarlet raced back to the pack house, every moment felt heavy with foreboding. The grand, imposing structure that once promised solace now loomed like a mausoleum of memories, a constant reminder of a life meticulously designed by others. Here, among the somber faces of family and the calculated smiles of those who wielded control like a weapon, she was nothing more than a pawn, a living embodiment of secrets and sacrifices. Each step echoed with the unspoken weight of betrayal, and every shadow whispered of the inner turmoil that threatened to engulf her. In that charged atmosphere, where every interaction was laced with hidden agendas and every smile masked a dagger, Scarlet's heart teetered on the edge of despair. The looming presence of Sarah, a figure as enigmatic as she was manipulative, cast a long, dark shadow over her already fragile world. Under Sarah's icy care, every tender moment was weaponized, turning love into currency and trust into a bargaining chip. Yet, within this storm of darkness and deception, there was a glimmer of something else, a spark of defiance, a silent vow that somewhere deep within, the fire of true passion still burned. It was the kind of fire that could light up the darkest corners of a soul, that could transform pain into strength, and despair into the promise of redemption. As the night, Unfolded with its shifting moods, the stage was set for a journey that would challenge the very fabric of Scarlet's being. This is the beginning of a story where every heartbeat carries a secret, every breath whispers a promise, and every shadow hides a revelation. A story of isolation and inner conflict, of battles fought in silence, and the search for a love that defies fate. As the cold night wraps around her like a shroud, Scarlet stands at the threshold of her destiny, poised between the world she has known and the wild, uncharted realm of her true self. And as the first light of dawn edges closer, the questions remain. Will she find the strength to reclaim her life, or will the forces that seek to control her forever bind her to a fate she never chose? In this cinematic tapestry of love, betrayal, and self-discovery, the journey has only just begun. The narrow path twisted like a serpent through the darkened forest, and in its silence, a low, guttural growl emerged, deep and primal, vibrating through the very air. Scarlet's pulse pounded in her ears as the sound morphed into the unmistakable snap of jaws clashing in the distance. In that charged moment, the stillness of the night shattered, giving way to a brutal symphony of nature's raw fury. Before her, two colossal wolves engaged in a battle that seemed to shake the earth itself. One bore a wild mix of white and brown fur, its eyes wild and bloodthirsty, a rogue spirit unleashed upon its kin. The other, a mighty black wolf, fought with a desperate strength despite its obvious wounds. Their ferocity was like nothing Scarlet had ever witnessed. Claws slashed through the air, and teeth flashed in the pale light as they tore at one another with savage determination. The feral growls and violent snarls blended with the sound of tearing flesh, creating a cacophony that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. The rogue wolf lunged again with lethal intent, its body twisting in midair as it aimed for a decisive strike. Scarlet's heart lurched. She instinctively braced herself for impact, feeling the surge of adrenaline rushing through her veins like molten fire. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to run, to hide, but destiny had already set its course. The beast's savage cry, mingled with the echo of its snapping jaws, reverberated deep inside her, sparking a dormant power that had long slumbered beneath her human veneer. In that critical instant, the transformation began. Scarlet felt an intense heat radiate from within, a burning current that surged through her bloodstream and defied the constraints of flesh and bone. It started as a subtle, almost imperceptible flicker, a warning sign of the impending change. But as the ferocity of the wolves' battle intensified, so did the fire inside her, growing into an inferno that demanded release. Her muscles tightened, her skin prickled, and the world around her blurred into an abstract tapestry of dark shapes and frantic movements. With a sudden, almost violent surge, her form began to shift. The sensation was both excruciating and liberating, a melding of pain and power that coursed through every fiber of her being. Scarlet's eyes widened as she felt her human self dissolve, replaced by something raw and primal. Her body elongated and grew lithe, her limbs stretching and reconfiguring with a fluid grace that defied nature. In mere seconds, she was no longer the woman who had ridden the lonely road. She had transformed into a magnificent white wolf, her eyes now a piercing shade of sea green that shimmered with a newfound intensity. The transformation was not merely physical, it was an awakening of a long-forgotten heritage, a connection to the wild that had always lurked beneath the surface. As her senses sharpened, every detail of the battle came into stark relief. The scent of blood, the acrid tang of fear and anger, and the raw, musky odor of the forest flooded her nostrils. The world, once muted in the gloom of night, now pulsed with vibrant energy. Every sound became a clarion call, every movement a vital part of an ancient, primal dance. In her new form, Scarlet felt the strength and agility of the wolf coursing through her veins. With a powerful leap, she joined the fray. The rogue wolf, so engrossed in its brutal duel, had not anticipated this sudden spectral presence. In an instinctive, almost balletic motion, she launched herself at the beast, her jaws meeting its flank in a burst of savage determination. The impact was fierce. She bit down hard, her teeth sinking into the soft flesh, while her claws raked down in a series of rapid, fluid strikes. The rogue howled in shock and pain, its momentum faltering, as the unexpected assault took it by surprise. Amid the chaos of snarls and wild scuffles, time seemed to slow for Scarlet. Every heartbeat was a drum of defiance. Every breath was a testament to her resilience. The battlefield of the narrow path had transformed into a realm where human frailty gave way to animal instinct, a place where the fierce beauty of the wild ruled supreme. In that moment, the primal connection between predator and prey blurred into a single, shared existence, bound by survival and the raw force of nature. Yet even as the rogue wolf recoiled and staggered backward, its defeat was not yet sealed. The black wolf, wounded but unbowed, continued its desperate struggle, a living embodiment of defiance against the merciless odds. Scarlet, caught in the throes of her transformation, was torn between the impulse to intervene further and the instinct to retreat into the safety of the shadows. The adrenaline, the shock of the transformation, and the raw ferocity of the battle mingled into a heady cocktail that made every second an eternity. As the clash of beasts raged on, the forest around them seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a moment of brutal beauty and unyielding intensity. Scarlet's transformation had not just been an escape. It was a call to arms, a reminder of the untamed power that lay dormant within her. And now, with the fate of the battle hanging in, a delicate balance, one pressing question reverberated in the silence. What will happen once the battle ends? After the clamor of battle faded into a trembling silence, the narrow path bore the scars of a savage encounter. Scarlet, now in her lupine form, paused amidst the scattered remnants of the fight. The air, once alive with the cacophony of snarls and snapping jaws, now whispered only soft echoes of pain and survival. As the dust settled, she sensed that the violence had left behind not just wounded flesh, but also wounded souls. Her eyes, still glowing with the fierce intensity of the transformation, fell upon the fallen figure of the wounded wolf. Slowly, as if time itself wished to spare him further agony, the creature's rugged form began to soften. In a mesmerizing interplay of light and shadow, the beast's wild features shifted, and he reverted to his human guise. The metamorphosis was delicate yet profound, revealing a man whose eyes, though pained and weary, carried an undeniable vulnerability. As Scarlet drew closer, the man's golden brown eyes locked onto her with an unspoken intensity that stirred something deep within her. In that charged moment, his gaze seemed to pierce through the very armor of her being. He looked past the primal fierceness of her wolf form, and instead focused on a singular, cherished detail: the delicate silver bracelet that adorned her wrist, a small relic, intricately designed with a tiny red heart at its center. This bracelet, a token from her late mother, shone with a quiet luminescence against the backdrop of chaos, and its significance was palpable in the charged air between them. For a long, suspended moment, words failed them both. The wounded man's eyes held a silent plea, an unspoken connection that bridged the gap between pain and hope. His trembling hand reached out, not in attack, but in wonder, as if yearning to trace the contours of the bracelet, to understand the legacy it carried. Scarlet's heart clenched at the sight. This simple piece of jewelry, so fragile and tender, now resonated with the weight of a past filled with love, loss, and the unyielding bond of memory. The wounded man's voice emerged softly, barely, a whisper, laden with both admiration and sorrow. "Your bracelet. It's beautiful," he murmured, his tone a mixture of awe and melancholy. Each word was a caress upon the silence, and in that quiet confession, Scarlet felt a surge of emotions crashing over her. It wasn't merely a trinket, It was the last, tangible echo of her mother's love, a beacon amid the tumult of her fractured existence. In his eyes, she sensed not just curiosity, but an invitation, a plea to share a story that had long been locked away in the depths of her heart. Scarlet hesitated, her gaze darting to the bracelet that had always been her tether to a life once filled with tenderness, memories of a mother's gentle laughter, of warm embraces and whispered secrets, mingled with the bitter taste of loss. The delicate silver band was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of continuity, a quiet reminder that even in the midst of the wild, unbridled chaos of her existence, there was a piece of her past that remained untouched by the cruelty of fate. Yet the man's eyes, glistening with empathy and an almost desperate hope, hinted at a mystery that was as profound as it was elusive. His silent wonder was laced with questions. Who was she really? What stories did that bracelet conceal? And, more pressingly, why did its presence evoke such a powerful, almost magnetic response within him? The connection between them, though wordless, was laden with layers of meaning. Each look, each subtle gesture weaving a tapestry of unspoken understanding. In that moment of fragile intimacy, the world around them seemed to recede, leaving only the soft rustle of the forest and the distant murmur of night. The boundaries between human and beast, between duty and desire, blurred into an enigmatic dance of vulnerability and strength. Scarlet felt as though the heartbeat of the earth itself was pulsing in time with her own, a rhythmic reminder of the silent bonds that unite us all in moments of shared sorrow and unexpected solace. The air hung heavy with the unspoken promise of revelations yet to come. The wounded man's quiet admiration for the bracelet, his gentle reverence for the memories it carried, opened a doorway into a deeper narrative. A narrative where pain and love intertwined, where every scar told a story of resilience and longing. As he slowly withdrew his hand, a profound silence fell between them, punctuated only by the soft exhale of breath and the quiet thump of a sorrowful heart. Standing there on the dim, scarred path, Scarlet couldn't help but wonder, what is it about that humble bracelet, a relic of a love lost, that could stir such potent emotions and bind two wounded souls together in a moment of transcendental understanding? Could this delicate symbol be the key to unlocking a hidden past? Or perhaps a sign of a future where healing might finally begin? The mystery of that bond, shimmering in the quiet intensity of their shared gaze, left an echoing question that beckoned them both into the uncharted depths of a destiny yet to be revealed. Scarlet's paws pounded against the cold, uneven ground as she sprinted away from the battlefield. The taste of iron still lingered in her mouth, mixed with the bitter tang of fear and adrenaline, while every breath burned her lungs like a searing flame. The chaotic echoes of snarls and snapping jaws faded behind her, replaced by a relentless pounding in her ears and a deep, gnawing exhaustion that threatened to pull her under. Every step she took was a battle against her own aching body. Her muscles screamed with fatigue, and the sting of fresh wounds from the earlier fight pulsed in rhythm with her rapid heartbeat. Yet, beneath that physical pain, a heavier burden pressed down on her, a crushing weight of sorrow, betrayal, and the dread of what awaited her at home. As she raced along the narrow, moonlit path, the darkness around her seemed to close in, amplifying the isolation of her desperate flight. In her mind, Scarlet's thoughts swirled like a tempest. Memories of the fierce clash, the primal transformation, and that silent, profound connection with the wounded man played over and over. But they were swiftly replaced by the pressing reality of her current plight, the looming presence of her family, the pack house that had once promised refuge but now loomed as a mausoleum of secrets and control. With each frantic stride, she could almost feel the cold, scrutinizing gaze of her family members waiting in the shadows, ready to pass judgment on every scar, both visible and hidden. The crisp night air whipped against her fur and skin as she neared the towering silhouette of the pack house, its grand, imposing facade, illuminated intermittently by flickering street lamps, struck a dissonant chord with the chaos of her recent battle. Instead of a sanctuary, it appeared as a fortress that guarded her past and the manipulations of those who claimed to love her. Scarlet's heart pounded not only from exertion, but from the impending confrontation that lurked like a storm cloud on the horizon of her troubled soul. Her thoughts turned bitter and reflective. How many times had she endured these harsh retributions? How often had her body become currency in the hands of a family that saw her as little more than a pawn in a game of power? Every bruise, every cut was a reminder of the sacrifices forced upon her, of the life she never chose but had been left to endure. The physical pain was a constant, searing echo of the emotional turmoil within her, a relentless reminder that survival came at an unbearable cost. As she approached the heavy, worn doors of the pack house, her pulse thrummed like a warning drum. The familiar creak of the door was jarring against the silence of the night, an ominous prelude to the reunion that awaited her. Scarlet's breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment, she hesitated, caught between the instinct to flee further into the night and the grim necessity of facing the cold realities of home. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the soft glow of old chandeliers casting long, somber shadows on the polished floors. Each step into the house felt like a descent into a labyrinth of memories, both tender and cruel. The very air seemed heavy with unspoken words, the silence punctuated only by the distant, muffled sounds of voices that carried the weight of disapproval and control. Scarlet's heart ached as she recalled the countless times she had felt trapped in this oppressive web of familial duty and expectation. In the quiet solitude of the pack house's entryway, Scarlet's inner monologue grew louder. What awaits? Me here? She wondered, her thoughts a mix of dread and defiance. Is it another cold interrogation about my recent actions? Another reminder that I am nothing more than a commodity in their eyes? The memories of her father's stern gaze, of Sarah's calculated smiles and harsh whispers, flashed unbidden through her mind. Each recollection was a reminder of the power they held over her, power that seemed to seep into every corner of the home, leaving no space for solace or true freedom. The very walls of the pack house appeared to close in around her, as if eager to absorb her pain and silence her inner rebellion. Scarlet could almost hear the murmurs of disapproval echoing in the corridors, the hushed accusations and the cold, measured tones of authority. Every step deeper into the house intensified the sense of impending conflict, a confrontation that had been brewing long before her desperate escape. As she reached the main hall, the grand room that served as the family's gathering space, Scarlet's pulse quickened with a mix of fear and steely resolve. In that vast, shadowed expanse, the stage was set for the inevitable reckoning. The faces of those who ruled her world, the ones who had manipulated her life, exploited her vulnerabilities, and profited from her pain, were waiting in the dim light, their expressions unreadable, and their intentions as cold as the stone floors beneath her feet. In that moment of suspended anticipation, as Scarlet stood at the threshold of the hall, she felt the full weight of her isolation and defiance. The physical strain of her hurried escape mingled with the emotional turmoil of confronting a past filled with betrayal and coercion. And as the silence of the hall deepened into a heavy, expectant hush, one chilling thought echoed through her mind. What dark truths and confrontations await her in the heart of this oppressive home? Scarlet stepped through the heavy, carved doors of the pack house, her heart heavy with anticipation and dread. The familiar scent of old wood and candle wax, once a comforting embrace, now felt like the cold, calculated welcome of a place where every corner harbored secrets and judgments. As she crossed the threshold, the warmth of home seemed but a distant memory, a mere illusion shattered by the icy reception that awaited her. In the dimly lit foyer, her father, Bruce, sat by the grand fireplace, his dark eyes, usually brimming, with unspoken strength, now carried a blend of concern and stern disapproval as they fixed upon her. His silence was as heavy as the ancient portraits that lined the walls, each a reminder of legacy and expectation. Bruce's gaze, measured and penetrating, made Scarlet's heart ache with the weight of unspoken reproach. It was as if every scar on her body, each mark of a past battle, served as a testament to her failures in their eyes, a price paid for, a life she never chose. Before Scarlet could find the words to explain her desperate flight from the battlefield, Sarah emerged into view. Clad in elegant attire that contrasted starkly with the faded splendor of the pack house, Sarah's presence was both commanding and disarming. Her short, meticulously styled brown hair framed a face that wore a mask of concern so skillfully that it nearly concealed the calculating gleam in her eyes. With a smooth, practiced grace, she approached Scarlet, carrying a bowl of water and a neatly folded cloth, as if they were mere tokens of maternal care. But behind that facade, every gesture, every word was laced with a hidden agenda. "Come here, darling," Sarah said softly, her voice a silken lure that barely masked the chill beneath. "Let me take care of you." The words dripped with a false tenderness, a scripted kindness rehearsed countless times before. As Sarah dabbed at Scarlet's wounds with the cloth, the touch was gentle, almost motherly, yet it left behind an unmistakable residue of manipulation. Scarlet felt her body, her very essence, being treated not as a living, breathing being with its own will, but as a commodity, a pawn in a game of power and control. In that moment, the dynamics of the pack house revealed themselves in stark clarity. Scarlet's body, marred by the scars of physical battles and the invisible wounds of a lifetime of control, was valued less for its resilience than for its utility. Every bruise, every mark served as a ledger entry in a book of debts owed to the family's ambitions. Bruce's silent, sorrowful glance, combined with Sarah's rehearsed concern, painted a picture of a home where love was measured in sacrifices and loyalty was bought with the currency of submission. As Sarah continued her ministrations, her eyes flickered briefly with something that could be mistaken for genuine care. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cool detachment of someone who had long learned to hide behind a mask of feigned sympathy. Scarlet's thoughts churned silently. What is the true motive behind Sarah's concern? Is it protection, or is it another means of keeping her tethered to a destiny dictated by others? Bruce finally spoke, his voice low and measured, the timbre carrying both a paternal warmth and an undercurrent of regret. "Scarlet, you're hurt," he said, his words heavy with an authority that brooked no argument. His concern was real, yet there was an unmistakable distance in his tone, a chasm created by years of unyielding duty and a relentless quest for control over the family's legacy. In his eyes, the bond of blood was sacred, yet it was tempered by the harsh realities of a life where emotions were often sacrificed at the altar of survival. Scarlet's gaze shifted between the two figures, her father, whose quiet sorrow spoke volumes of a love that had been marred by duty, and Sarah, whose every move was designed to remind her of the price of defiance. The very air around them seemed to shimmer with the unspoken understanding that here, every act of kindness was measured against an unyielding ledger of expectations and debts. In this place, where every tender touch concealed a threat, where every word of care was weighted with ulterior motives, the idea of home had become a prison of its own making. As Scarlet's wounds throbbed and her spirit bore the weight of isolation, she couldn't help but question the true cost of this existence. Was the warmth of family love ever genuine, or had it all been transformed into a currency of control and manipulation? The questions lingered in the silence of the grand foyer, unanswered and echoing through the hollow corridors of the pack house. In that tense reunion, with her body battered and her heart heavy, Scarlet realized that she was caught between two forces: a father whose love was as formidable as it was constricting, and a caretaker whose every gesture was a subtle reminder of her place in a meticulously controlled world. And as she stood there, silently absorbing the icy reception of a home that once promised solace, one haunting question remained. Could she ever reclaim the freedom of her own destiny, when every touch and every look was a calculated move in a game where her very being was the prize? The room grew unbearably silent as Scarlet sat across from her father and Sarah, the weight of destiny pressing down like a leaden shroud. In that still, charged moment, the brutal reality of her future was laid bare. An impending marriage to the ruthless alpha, Anthony, a man whose name alone conjured images of power, cruelty, and unyielding ambition. Her father's voice, heavy with regret and resignation, cut through the silence. "Scarlet, Anthony of the Blood Moon Pack has agreed to the marriage," he announced. The words crashed over her like a tidal wave, short, unyielding. Each syllable felt like a chain wrapping tighter around her spirit. Scarlet's heart pounded erratically in her chest as she struggled to process the shock. She could barely lift her gaze. Every line on her face, every scar on her body, was a silent testament to the battles she'd fought. And now, she was forced into a fight she never chose. Her body trembled with a mixture of fear and defiance. Every inch of her being screamed, "No!" Sarah's voice, silky yet venomous, echoed around the room. "It's a contract marriage," she said coolly. "Anthony will remain married to you until he finds his lost love. Then, he'll divorce you." The finality of her words struck Scarlet like a blow. The concept of a contract, a cold legal agreement, stripped of any promise of love or warmth, made her blood run cold. Short sentences pierced the heavy silence. "You have no choice. This is not up for debate. You are 21, Scarlet." Each word was a verdict, a reminder that her life was no longer her own. The truth was unyielding and brutal. Scarlet felt betrayed, not only by the world that had forced her into this role, but by the very people who were supposed to protect her. How could love be reduced to a contract? How could her worth be measured in cold terms and empty promises? Inside, her thoughts battled furiously. "I refuse to be nothing more than a placeholder, a means to an end." The thought echoed in her mind, each pulse of anger mingling with tears of despair. Every moment of her past, the fights, the escapes, the quiet rebellions, had led her to this crushing reality. The betrayal was not just of her heart, it was a betrayal of her very soul. She had trusted them. She had believed in the promises of a different life. And now, here it was, forcing its way upon her with the cold logic of a contract. Her father's eyes were filled with sorrow, but his tone left no room for negotiation. "Anthony is a powerful alpha," he said, in a voice that held both authority and pity. "He will secure your future, Scarlet." But the future he spoke of was a gilded cage, a life of luxury and power built on sacrifice, on the loss of who she truly was. His words, meant to comfort, only deepened the sting of betrayal. Scarlet's inner voice was a cacophony of grief and resistance. "This is my life. I did not ask for this. I did not want to be defined by a contract. I am more than the sum of my scars." But those thoughts were drowned out by the relentless, oppressive reality of her situation. The contract was laid out before her like a cold, unyielding decree, its pages filled with legal jargon that stripped away any hope of a personal future, a future where she could choose love freely. Her hands, still trembling from the echoes of battle and the fresh wounds of betrayal, reached out to the contract. She felt the chill of the paper beneath her fingertips, a tangible reminder of the control that others held over her destiny. The ink on the document was sharp and unforgiving. With each word she read, her spirit sank deeper into despair. Every clause was a nail in the coffin of her hopes. Short, rapid breaths punctuated the silence as Scarlet stared at the document. "A contract marriage," she repeated softly, as if the phrase itself were an incantation meant to seal her fate. Her voice was barely audible, a whisper of defiance drowned in the roar of her inner turmoil. In that moment, Time seemed to slow. The faces of her father and Sarah blurred into a distant haze of authority and regret. All that remained was the cold, unyielding reality of the contract, the unchangeable fact that she was to be bound to a man she had never chosen, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness was well known and feared. The room pulsed with a tension that was almost tangible. Scarlet's thoughts raced. What does it mean to be trapped by fate? To have my worth measured in a contract? To lose the essence of who I am? Her heart ached with the knowledge that this was not merely a union of two individuals, but a transaction, a cruel exchange where her dreams and desires were traded for power and security. Her eyes, shimmering with unshed tears, locked onto a single spot on the contract, a line that marked the final damning clause. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with the echoes of her shattered hopes. In that charged pause, the weight of her, fate pressed in on her, and a single agonizing question formed in the depths of her mind. How could I ever escape this trap, this life that had been forced upon me? And in that dramatic, breathless moment, the truth was laid bare. She was trapped, ensnared by the cold, calculated machinations of those who saw her not as a person, but as a means to an end. Dawn crept slowly over the horizon, its soft golden light filtering through the narrow windows of the packhouse. In that quiet morning, as the first rays of light kissed the cold stone walls, Scarlet found herself standing before the contract that had come to define her fate. The paper lay before her on an old wooden table, its ink stark and unyielding, a physical manifestation of the future she never desired, yet could no longer escape. In the fragile silence of that early hour, her mind churned with the echoes of past battles and whispered promises of freedom. Every memory of fierce defiance and desperate escape now mingled with a bittersweet resignation, as if the light itself was mourning the loss of her true self. Scarlet's heart ached with an internal conflict, a tumultuous struggle between the hope of forging her own destiny and the relentless weight of destiny imposed by others. Her fingers, trembling from exhaustion and sorrow, brushed over the smooth surface of the contract. Each word seemed to bind her tighter to a fate that had been meticulously planned for her, one that valued her not for who she was, but for the power she could confer as a tool in the hands of her family. And yet, in that poignant stillness, she felt an almost spectral pull, a quiet invitation to surrender, to accept that some battles are not meant to be fought. The soft glow of morning light made the ink on the paper shimmer like fragile promise and inevitable loss. As she sat down, the world outside was coming alive with gentle sounds, a distant chirp of birds, the rustle of leaves stirred by a tender breeze, contrasting sharply with the cold finality of the document before her. Scarlet's thoughts drifted like fallen petals. Is it truly my fate to be confined by this contract? Am I, in my heart, a prisoner of forces beyond my control, or does some ember of free will still linger within me? These questions, soft yet persistent, echoed in the quiet chamber of her soul. Her eyes, glistening with a mixture of sorrow and defiance, slowly lowered to the signature line. In that single fateful moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The act of signing was not merely the conclusion of a legal transaction. It was a haunting ritual, a farewell to the possibility of choosing her own path. With each careful stroke of the pen, Scarlet felt a part of her spirit slipping away, merging with the ink, sealing her future in a language written by others. The process was almost poetic in its inevitability. The scratch of the pen against the paper resonated with the soft murmur of the wind outside, as if nature itself was lamenting the surrender of a free soul. Scarlet's hand moved with a quiet determination, yet behind every line lay a torrent of unspoken resistance. The contract, a testament to power and control, was now her unyielding destiny, a future wrapped in the bittersweet light of a new day. In the reflective surface of the table, Scarlet's eyes met her own, a gaze filled with both resignation and an enduring, questioning spark. The contract was complete. With the final mark, it was as if time had halted, and for a heartbeat, the room filled with a profound silence. In that silence, the age-old question of fate versus free will loomed large. Had she chosen this path, or had the path chosen her? The soft morning light, warming the edges of the room, offered little comfort. Instead, it accentuated the delicate lines of sorrow on her face and the quiet strength that belied the storm within her. Outside, the world was waking, but inside, Scarlet's heart beat with a mournful cadence, a lullaby of lost dreams and unfulfilled desires. Her acceptance was not joyous. It was the acceptance of inevitability, a surrender to the forces that had manipulated her life from the very beginning. Each moment of that ritual carried the weight of a silent farewell. The ceremony of signing was not celebrated with fanfare or adorned with the promise of love. It was a solemn rite, a farewell to the woman she once was, and the beginning of a life she never wished to lead. And yet, within that quiet surrender, there lingered a fragile question. In a world dictated by power and control, where every decision seemed preordained, was there truly any space left for free will? Could the human spirit ever break free from the chains of destiny? Or was every heart, every soul, merely a player in a game of fates written long ago? As the final traces of ink dried on the paper, Scarlet felt the chill of a new reality seeping into her bones. The contract was now a permanent part of her, a silent, omnipresent reminder that she had been coerced into a union that would forever bind her to a ruthless alpha, a man whose cold ambition and merciless reputation were known to all. In that quiet, heart-wrenching moment, the sunrise bore witness to her reluctant acceptance, a poignant blend of soft hope and crushing despair. And as the golden light slowly gave way to the steady march of the day, Scarlet stood at the threshold of a life that promised security at the cost of her very essence. In the lingering silence of that fateful morning, her inner voice, though subdued, whispered one last, lingering question. In the battle between destiny and free will, can one ever truly claim to have chosen their own path? The wedding day arrived with an air of opulence that seemed to mock Scarlet's inner despair. The grand hall of the pack house had been transformed into a lavish venue, adorned with cascading bouquets of deep red roses and ivory lilies. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, scattering light across polished marble floors and gilded walls, while delicate strands of pearls and silver draped over every surface like whispered promises of a perfect life. The air was rich with the fragrance of exotic spices and freshly cut flowers, mingling with the subtle hint of expensive cologne, a scent that, to the untrained nose, might suggest love and commitment. Yet, to Scarlet, each note felt like an echo of a life not chosen, a gilded trap meticulously designed to ensnare her heart. Outside, the morning light broke in gentle hues of gold and blush, casting a soft glow over the sprawling gardens. The outdoor pavilion, draped in sheer fabrics that fluttered in the breeze, offered an illusion of freedom and beauty. Guests, dressed in their finest attire, arrived with smiles and congratulations, their voices carrying a melody of celebration that filled the space with an infectious energy. Every detail of the ceremony was designed to dazzle: the intricate lacework of the bride's gown, the polished sheen of the groom's suit, and the meticulously arranged floral arch that framed the sacred space where vows were to be exchanged. Yet, beneath the surface of this extravagant display, Scarlet's heart was a storm of conflicting emotions. As she walked slowly down the aisle, each step felt weighted with the gravity of a profound loss. Her eyes, though masked with the practiced calm of a bride, betrayed a glimmer of sorrow, a silent farewell to the freedom she once knew. Every step echoed the fading beat of a heart that longed to resist, to run away from this destiny that had been forced upon her. the luxurious surroundings, so meticulously crafted to celebrate unity and love, only deepened the hollow ache within her. Her gaze shifted from the opulent decor to the faces of those gathered. In the sea of well-wishers and acquaintances, she found only a reflection of her own inner conflict. There was no warmth in the smiles that met her eyes. Instead, they seemed rehearsed, as if each guest had been complicit in the silent conspiracy that had sealed her fate. The joyful laughter and congratulatory murmurs that filled the hall felt distant and unattainable, mere background noise against the tumult of her inner monologue. Standing at the altar was Anthony, the ruthless alpha, whose very presence commanded both fear and admiration. His expression, meticulously controlled and devoid of genuine affection, offered nothing more than the cold efficiency of a man bound by duty rather than passion. As the ceremony commenced, Anthony's eyes met Scarlet's briefly, a glance that was neither tender nor loving, but hollow and calculating. Every word spoken during the vows, every carefully scripted promise, reverberated in her mind as empty formalities designed to justify a union that would never fill the void in her soul. The ceremony proceeded with all the grandeur one would expect, a symphony of choral voices, the soft hum of string instruments, and the rustle of silk as the guests shifted in anticipation. Yet to Scarlet the entire spectacle was a poignant masquerade, a public farewell to the woman she had once been, a symbolic end to the life she could have chosen for herself. As she recited her vows in a voice that trembled with unshed tears, she felt as though she were reciting lines in a play, detached from the reality of the moment. Her heart pounded with a silent protest, even as her lips moved with the precision of someone who had long accepted her fate. In that moment, the contrast between the outward celebration and her inner turmoil was stark and jarring. The luxurious setting, the perfumed air, and the carefully choreographed movements of the guests stood in bitter contrast to the emptiness that echoed within her. Each glittering detail, each sumptuous ornament, only served as a reminder of the life that was slipping away, a life where her voice and her desires were sacrificed on the altar of duty and manipulation. As the final vows were spoken and the ceremonial ring exchanged, the applause that erupted from the assembled crowd felt like a deafening finality, a public exclamation of a union that was as much a legal contract as it was a betrayal of her true self. In that moment, Scarlet's eyes met those of a stranger in the crowd, a fleeting look that seemed to ask a question both poignant and piercing. Was this ceremony the beginning of a new chapter, or the final farewell to the freedom of her true self? In the echoing aftermath of the celebration, as the clamor of applause faded into a silence heavy with unspoken questions, Scarlet stood at the crossroads of her fate. Surrounded by splendor yet trapped within an invisible cage, she could only wonder whether the vows she had uttered were the seeds of a future yet to bloom, or the final chapter of a life that was never truly hers. In the hushed silence that followed the resounding applause of the ceremony, Scarlet stood motionless at the altar. The echoes of the exchanged vows still reverberated in her ears, yet inside, an overwhelming emptiness had taken root. Every word that had been spoken, a promise of duty, of honor, of a life bound by contract, felt like a hollow incantation, sealing away the possibility of love. The brilliant lights and sumptuous decor, once symbols of grandeur and hope, now only illuminated the stark reality of her confinement. Her heart, heavy with unfulfilled yearning, whispered a silent cry for the freedom of genuine affection that was forever out of reach. As the crowd dispersed and the festivities began to dwindle into an indistinct murmur, Scarlet slipped away from the throng. The corridors of the pack house, lined with opulent tapestries and glistening mirrors, transformed into a labyrinth of sorrow. Each step she took echoed with the weight of duty and the burden of a fate imposed upon her without choice. Her mind was awash with conflicting emotions, a mingling of despair, resignation, and a desperate quivering hope that somewhere in the vast darkness a glimmer of freedom might still be found. In a secluded corner of the grand hall, Scarlet sought solace. The soft murmur of her thoughts blended with the distant strains of music as she closed her eyes and tried to grasp the fragments of a life that might have been hers. It was as if the vows had extinguished the spark within her, leaving behind only the cold mechanical pulse of obligation. She felt her heart labor under the weight of promises made not from passion, but from a cold contract, a tool for power that was wielded by those who saw her as little more than a possession. Amidst this internal tumult, the subtle power plays of the pack members began to reveal themselves. Sarah, ever present and disarmingly graceful, moved through the room with a quiet satisfaction that bordered on vindictiveness. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, flickered with a secret pleasure as she observed Scarlet's isolated state. It was as if Sarah derived a perverse joy from witnessing the unraveling of Scarlet's spirit, a silent reminder that every tear and every moment of vulnerability only served to reinforce the control the pack wielded over her. Even the hushed comments and side glances from other members bore the unmistakable mark of a power structure designed to keep her subdued and compliant. Yet beneath the veneer of cold authority and calculated indifference, Scarlet's internal world burned with a suppressed yearning for something real, a tender connection that could pierce through the bleakness of her new reality. In the solitude of that aftermath, she could no longer deny the profound sorrow that had taken root in her soul. The promises of love and freedom had been replaced by the crushing burden of duty, leaving her to wonder if the life before her was merely an elaborate charade, a public performance to hide the truth of her inner desolation. As the day wore on, Scarlet wandered through the corridors, her footsteps a quiet testament to her inner desolation. In every ornate reflection she passed, she saw the ghost of the woman she once was, a vibrant spirit, unburdened by the chains of obligation. That memory haunted her, a tender yet painful reminder of a freedom now lost. Every mirrored surface captured a fleeting glimpse of her sorrow-stricken eyes, amplifying the anguish that pulsed just beneath the surface. Outside, the world continued with its indifferent rhythm. Life bustling in the gardens, laughter echoing in the distance, and the steady, unyielding march of time. But for Scarlet, time had become a silent tormentor, each moment stretching out as an eternity of longing and regret. Her inner dialogue, quiet yet insistent, questioned the very nature of fate. Was she destined to be nothing more than a puppet in a grand, unfeeling game? Or could a single spark of hope ignite the possibility of reclaiming her own identity, even amidst the shadows of her enforced commitment? Her thoughts drifted back to the delicate moments before the vows were uttered, the fleeting warmth of a genuine smile, the unspoken promises exchanged in a different time, when love was more than a calculated transaction. Those memories, though tinged with the bittersweet taste of what might have been, offered a glimmer of defiance. They whispered that perhaps beneath the crushing layers of duty and expectation, there remained a vestige of the woman who could still choose her own path. In that quiet aftermath, Scarlet's eyes filled with unshed tears as she gazed out of a large, arched window. The golden light of the late afternoon filtered in softly, casting long shadows that danced gently across the floor. In that moment of introspection, she allowed herself to wonder, was this ceremony truly the beginning of a new chapter? A step toward a future where her heart could someday be free? Or was it the final farewell to her true self, a permanent surrender to a destiny written in ink and enforced by those who cared little for the soul behind the name? As the murmurs of the pack's influence lingered in the air and the heavy silence of expectation pressed in around her, Scarlet's internal struggle deepened. In the balance between resignation and the faintest spark of hope, one poignant question remained, echoing softly in the depths of her soul. Amidst this carefully orchestrated public farewell to her freedom, is there any chance that love, in its most unadulterated form, might yet find a way to break through the chains of fate? The sleek black Mercedes waited under the muted glow of the early evening streetlights, its polished surface reflecting a fractured image of the life Scarlet was about to leave behind. As she stepped out of the pack house, every step toward that waiting vehicle felt like a march toward an uncertain future, a forced passage from the only world she had ever known into the vast unknown. Inside the car, the hum of the engine was a rhythmic lullaby that belied the turmoil inside her. The leather seats, cool and unyielding, were a stark reminder of the luxurious confinement awaiting her in Anthony's world, a world where comfort came at the price of freedom. Scarlet slid into the seat, her heart thudding in time with the soft purr of the engine. The smooth ride promised escape, yet every moment behind the wheel was laced with the bitter taste of resignation and a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. As the car pulled away from the grand, oppressive facade of the pack house, the familiar landmarks blurred into streaks of dim light against the darkened cityscape. Outside, the world seemed to whisper secrets of escape and possibility, a gentle invitation to break free from the chains of a predetermined destiny. Yet inside, Scarlet's mind was a battleground. Thoughts clashed like waves against the shore. The chilling certainty of being a pawn in Anthony's meticulously arranged plan, and the quiet, rebellious pulse that whispered of her own agency. Her reflection in the tinted window was a study in contrasts. In the glossy surface, the figure of a woman with sorrow-laden eyes and a determined set to her jaw stared back. The smooth glide of the car, the cool interior, and the measured cadence of the road ahead were all symbols of the world she had been forced to embrace, a world where every luxury was but a gilded cage. But beneath that polished exterior, the embers of rebellion still smoldered. Each mile that passed was a silent protest, a defiant beat in the rhythm of her heart that refused to be completely silenced. As the Mercedes accelerated down the highway, the hum of the tires on the pavement formed a steady hypnotic rhythm. Scarlet's thoughts drifted in tandem with the passing scenery, her mind teetering between the cold reality of her situation and a lingering dream of freedom. The passing night, with its scattered stars and endless highways, spoke to her of untold possibilities, a future that might hold a sliver of hope even in the midst of desolation. Every headlight that flashed by was a fleeting reminder of lives in motion, each one racing toward destinations of their own choosing. In the quiet confines of the car, Scarlet's internal dialogue grew louder. Am I merely a passenger on this journey, destined to be steered by forces far beyond my control? Yet, with every mile, a new thought arose. Perhaps I can find a way to take the wheel, to navigate my own path, even in this seemingly predestined rut. The tension of that duality, between the life that was forced upon her and the inner longing for autonomy, wove itself through every beat of her heart. The landscape outside was a canvas of soft shadows and fleeting glimmers of urban light, contrasting with the heavy burden in her chest. Each curve of the road seemed to mirror the twists and turns of her thoughts, the smooth ride a metaphor for the fluid yet uncertain path ahead. Though her outward expression was one of composed resignation, the subtle tension in her fingers on the steering wheel betrayed the undercurrent of rebellion simmering just beneath the surface. Every so often, as the car surged forward with measured grace, Scarlet allowed herself a moment to close her eyes and breathe deeply. In those brief, stolen instants, the rhythmic cadence of the engine and the steady pulse of her own heartbeat merged into a singular, silent promise that even in the face of relentless control and predetermined destiny, the human spirit might yet find a way to assert its will. The bittersweet taste of this internal rebellion was as palpable as the cool leather beneath her fingertips, a constant reminder that, while she might be trapped within Anthony's world for now, the seed of defiance had been sown deep within her soul. As the Mercedes roared onward into the night, its taillights dissolving into the darkness like fading memories, Scarlet's gaze drifted back to the reflection in the window. There, amidst the soft glow of streetlights and the relentless hum of the road, she saw not just the woman who had been forced into submission, but the faint outline of someone determined to reclaim her life. The journey was far from over. It was merely a transition, a delicate, poignant passage from a life of imposed duty to one where the faint promise of self-determination still flickered in the depths of her eyes. In that charged moment, as the cityscape melted away into the promise of unknown horizons, a quiet yet insistent thought emerged. Can I truly redefine my destiny, even when every mile takes me deeper into the very world that seeks to confine me? The answer lingered in the space between the steady rhythm of the road and the unspoken pulse of her heart. A silent declaration of rebellion that would shape the chapters yet to come. The imposing fortress loomed on the horizon like a relic, from a bygone era, a majestic yet foreboding monument that now marked the boundary of Scarlet's new existence. As she approached its towering stone walls, adorned with intricate carvings and centuries-old symbols of power, a shiver ran down her spine. The structure exuded a duality that was at once breathtaking and deeply oppressive, blending the grandeur of ancient design with the cold precision of modern confinement. Stepping through the massive arched gateway, Scarlet was immediately enveloped by an atmosphere that seemed to pulse with an enigmatic energy. The vast entrance hall was a cavern of marble and shadow, its high vaulted ceilings echoing with whispers of history and lost souls. Brilliant shafts of light pierced through narrow stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished floor, a spectacle that evoked both wonder and an unsettling sense of entrapment. Every detail of the hall, from the gleaming mosaics to the imposing statues of forgotten heroes, spoke of a legacy steeped in power and domination. As she was led through the grand corridors, her guide, a stern-faced attendant whose expression offered little warmth, pointed out the intricate tapestries and gilded mirrors that lined the walls. Each corridor was a passageway between beauty and imprisonment. The delicate artistry of centuries past mingled with the harsh reality that every step brought her deeper into a realm where freedom was nothing more than an illusion. Scarlet's eyes darted from one marvel to another. The sweeping staircase that spiraled upward like a promise of ascension, the ornate candelabras that flickered with a ghostly glow, and the meticulously maintained gardens visible through towering windows that framed the exterior world like a picture of an unattainable paradise. Yet, beneath the lavish exterior, a stifling chill clung to the very air. The luxurious surroundings, designed to inspire awe, also served as a constant reminder of the control imposed over her. Each marble column, each intricately wrought iron balustrade, stood as a silent sentinel to the order that reigned within these walls, a rigid structure where every aspect of life was dictated by tradition and expectation. Scarlet's heart pounded with conflicting emotions. Part of her marveled at the beauty and historical grandeur of the fortress, while another part recoiled at the thought of living in such a gilded cage where every breath felt measured and every moment predetermined. In one particularly expansive hall, where a grand chandelier hung like a constellation of frozen stars, Scarlet paused to absorb the overwhelming splendor. The space was vast, yet every ornate detail contributed to a suffocating sense of confinement. Here, the voices of ancient legends seemed to murmur from the walls, telling stories of empires risen and fallen, of power wielded without mercy. It was as if the very stones were imbued with the memory of past glories, and, simultaneously, the weight of an unyielding destiny that now awaited her. The beauty of the place was intoxicating, but it was tainted by an undercurrent of dread. The quiet knowledge that beneath the opulence lay an invisible prison, crafted by those who valued order above the essence of the individual. As Scarlet was escorted deeper into the fortress, the halls gave way to smaller, more intimate chambers. In these spaces, the air was heavy with the scent of aged parchment and burning incense, a sensory blend that was both alluring and melancholic. Every room seemed to carry its own secret, each corner hiding echoes of laughter, sorrow, and the endless passage of time. And yet for Scarlet, these secrets were not comforting. They were chains, binding her to a past that she had never chosen, and a future that was being relentlessly shaped by forces beyond her control. Her guide's words, measured and devoid of emotion, recited the history and significance of each hall, as though it were a lecture on the inevitability of fate. But Scarlet's inner monologue was anything but passive. Her thoughts roiled with the realization that she was no longer in a place of sanctuary, but in a fortress that stood as a testament to the very forces that had stripped her of her freedom. Is this beauty a blessing or a curse? She wondered, silently, her gaze lingering on the intricate patterns etched into the stone walls. Am I to be admired like a rare artifact, preserved and displayed for all to see, yet never allowed to break free? In that moment, as the ambient light played, upon the surfaces of the ancient structure, a profound sadness settled over her. The fortress, in all its majestic splendor, was a gilded prison, a realm where history and tradition intertwined to create an inescapable destiny. The grandeur that surrounded her was a facade masking the cold, unyielding reality of her confinement. Every lavish detail whispered a promise of permanence, a silent decree that she was now an integral part of this formidable order, whether she wished it or not. As she reached the final chamber, a quiet antechamber that overlooked the sprawling central courtyard, Scarlet felt the weight of her fate like never before. The beauty of the courtyard, a mosaic of vibrant colors, meticulously arranged flora, and the gentle murmur of a central fountain offered a stark contrast to the tumult within her. It was a scene of serene perfection that only served to deepen her internal conflict. Beneath the harmonious surface lay the true prison of her fate, a destiny crafted not from love, but from control, expectation, and the unyielding power of those who ruled this ancient realm. In the fading light of day, as the grandeur of the fortress shimmered with both promise and peril, Scarlet's heart whispered a solitary truth. Beneath all the splendor, she was a captive of her own destiny. And as she gazed upon the vast, echoing halls, a lingering question took root in her soul. Can true freedom ever exist within the confines of such a magnificent yet merciless prison? The tour began in a hushed corridor that led Scarlet into the heart of the fortress, a labyrinth of history and mystery. Her guide, a reserved figure in a tailored uniform, moved with deliberate grace, his measured steps echoing softly against ancient stone floors. As they entered the museum, Scarlet's eyes were immediately drawn to relics and artifacts displayed in glass cases, each piece a silent witness to eras long past. The room was awash in a gentle, filtered light that lent every exhibit a spectral quality, as though the ghosts of forgotten memories were stirring just beneath the surface. Every artifact told a story, faded portraits of regal ancestors, intricately crafted weapons that had once been symbols of power, and delicate porcelain vases whose fragile beauty belied a turbulent history. Scarlet's heart pounded with a mixture of fascination and an inexplicable foreboding. She felt as if the relics mirrored her own hidden depths, a life filled with splendor yet marred by secrets and lost opportunities. In the quiet space of the museum, the hushed whispers of history mingled with her inner voice, questioning what truths might lie hidden in the shadows of her own past. Leaving the museum, they advanced into a vast, domed library that seemed to stretch into infinity. Shelves carved from dark, polished wood towered around her, filled with ancient tomes and scrolls bound in leather. The scent of aged paper and ink was heavy in the air, a tangible reminder of the accumulated wisdom and sorrow of generations. Here, the cadence of her footsteps and the soft rustle of pages turning created a rhythm that was both comforting and melancholic. Her guide paused before a grand window, allowing her to take in the view of a meticulously maintained garden below, a vibrant contrast to the solemnity inside. Yet even as the sunlight danced across the spines of the books, Scarlet sensed that within these venerable halls lay more than mere words and stories. They were repositories of secrets. The silence of the library pressed in around her, and she couldn't help but wonder, what other hidden narratives were locked away, waiting to be discovered, like the fragments of her own suppressed desires? The tour continued with an unexpected twist as they descended a narrow staircase into a series of hidden chambers. The passage was dimly lit by flickering sconces, their gentle glow casting elongated shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Here, in a concealed corner of the fortress, the guide revealed a hidden bar, a clandestine room that buzzed with a quiet, illicit energy. The bar was a stark contrast to the formal grandeur of the earlier rooms. Dark, rich wood lined the walls, and soft leather banquettes invited a sense of clandestine comfort. The low murmur of hushed conversations and the clink of glass created an atmosphere both intimate and charged with tension. Scarlet noted with subtle curiosity how this secret haven, tucked away from the prying eyes of the public spaces, seemed to harbor its own set of untold stories. It was as if the very essence of the place resonated with the murmur of forbidden liaisons, betrayals, and the bittersweet taste of escape. As she moved through the bar, her eyes traced the delicate carvings on the mahogany counter and the intricate design of a vintage clock that ticked softly, a reminder that time here moved both inexorably and imperceptibly. Every detail hinted at layers of intrigue and whispered conspiracies. It was impossible not to draw a parallel between the hidden bar and her own inner life, a realm where secrets and unspoken longings dwelled, away from the scrutinizing gaze of a predestined future. Throughout the tour, Scarlet's guide maintained a calm, almost detached tone, reciting facts and figures with practiced ease. Yet, as he spoke of the fortress's storied past, of battles fought, alliances forged, and the price of ambition, the cadence of his words carried an undercurrent of both awe and caution. Each room, each artifact, seemed to serve as a metaphor for the dual nature of power, its capacity to elevate and its propensity to imprison. In that delicate balance between wonder and dread, Scarlet felt the weight of her own fate pressing against the elegance of the surroundings. The exquisite beauty of the museum, the solemn wisdom of the library, and the secret allure of the hidden bar all coexisted with the oppressive reality of her confinement. Each space was meticulously designed to inspire awe, yet beneath the surface lay a network of secrets, shadows that hinted at control, manipulation, and the inescapable hand of destiny. As the tour drew to a close, and Scarlet found herself standing, once more in a quiet, secluded corridor, she allowed her thoughts to wander. The polished stone, the whispered echoes of past glories, and the lingering aroma of aged paper all spoke of a fortress that was as much a prison as it was a palace. A silent question began to take root in her mind. What other secrets does this magnificent structure conceal? And could they, perhaps, hold the key to understanding the true nature of her own destiny? With each step that carried her further into the labyrinthine depths of the fortress, Scarlet sensed that the beauty around her was but a veneer, a shimmering illusion masking a harsher truth. The secrets of the fortress, much like the secrets of her own heart, were waiting to be unearthed, promising revelations that might alter the course of her fate forever. In the quiet sanctuary of the grand bathroom, Scarlet sought a moment of solitude, a chance to wash away not just the physical traces of her past, but also the lingering shadows that clung to her soul. The room was a masterpiece of antiquity and modern luxury combined. Marble floors that glowed softly in the diffused light, ornate fixtures glistening like hidden treasures, and an expansive bathtub that beckoned with promises of transient solace. Here, away from prying eyes and the suffocating expectations of the fortress, she could allow herself to simply be. As she slowly undressed, each piece of fabric removed felt like shedding a layer of the life that had been forced upon her. The cool air of the room kissed her bare skin, a stark contrast to the heated rush of memories that threatened to overwhelm her. With a trembling hand, she stepped into the large, inviting bathtub. The water, already drawn to the perfect temperature, welcomed her with a gentle embrace. It was warm, a soothing balm that enveloped her like a whispered secret, soft and persistent in its comfort. Scarlet settled into the water, letting its gentle current cradle her, each ripple a delicate caress against her tired limbs. The surface of the water shimmered with the soft reflection of the bathroom's artful design, a mosaic of pastel tiles and gilded accents that danced in the dim light. Outside, the world had faded into silence, leaving her alone with the sound of her own breathing and the quiet lapping of water against porcelain. In that space, time itself seemed to slow, allowing her mind to wander freely into realms of reflection and introspection. Every sensation in that moment was a study in contrasts. The warmth of the water seeped deep into her muscles, easing the physical aches born of battles both literal and emotional. Yet, as she let the water wash over her, a chill of inner loneliness and regret lingered stubbornly beneath the surface. It was as though the water could cleanse the external stains, but the scars etched in her heart, those memories of betrayal, of sacrifices made against her will, remained untouched, hidden in the depths, like secret currents that no tide could completely dislodge. Her eyes closed as she allowed herself to be consumed by the bath's quiet rhythm. The gentle steam rising from the water mingled with the soft, muted fragrance of lavender and sandalwood that permeated the room. Each inhalation carried with it the bittersweet scent of a past both beautiful and painful, a reminder of moments of love and loss, of choices made under duress. In that space, every droplet of water seemed to hold a memory, a moment of defiance, a whisper of hope, a trace of sorrow. They swirled together in a dance that was both mesmerizing and maddening. With each slow exhale, Scarlet tried to let go of the heaviness that had followed her like a persistent shadow. She wondered if, by immersing herself in the warm embrace of the water, she could somehow wash away the relentless tide of memories. The soothing flow pressed gently against her skin, as if urging her to surrender to the present, to find solace in the simple act of being. Yet even as the water worked its quiet magic, her mind remained restless, questioning the true nature of cleansing. Could the physical act of bathing ever truly erase the stains of a tormented past? Or were the remnants of her pain destined to linger, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the next reminder to resurface? In the reflective surface of the water, Scarlet caught a glimpse of herself, a woman both resilient and fragile, marked by the passage of time and the weight of unspoken sorrow. Her eyes, though weary, held a spark of defiance that refused to be completely quenched. She watched the gentle ripples distort her reflection, each wave a metaphor for the unpredictable nature of her inner life. It was a haunting, bittersweet sight, the beauty of the present moment intertwined with the irrevocable marks of history. As minutes turned into what felt like an eternity of introspection, Scarlet's thoughts drifted to the idea of renewal. The water, with its soft caress and calming presence, promised a temporary escape, a momentary reprieve from the harsh realities that awaited her outside these walls. But deep within, a lingering doubt persisted. No matter how much she tried to cleanse herself, could she ever rid herself entirely of the past? The scars, both visible and hidden, seemed woven into the very fabric of her being, impervious to the gentle, relentless flow of time and water. In that quiet, solitary moment, as the warmth of the bath mingled with the cool residue of her memories, Scarlet allowed herself a final, lingering thought. Can the act of cleansing ever truly free us from the echoes of our past? Or do we carry them with us always, like a secret tide beneath our skin? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the water continued to ripple softly, a tender, poignant reminder that some scars, though hidden, remain forever etched in the soul. The steam still clung to her skin, wisps of warmth rising from her damp hair as Scarlet stepped softly into the bedroom, clutching the towel around her. The plush carpet muffled her bare footsteps. The silence of the room was deep, broken only by the faint hum of the night air pressing against the grand windows. She moved toward the dresser, her mind still cloudy with thoughts soaked in bathwater and memory, until she felt it. A presence. She stopped cold. Anthony stood by the window, tall and motionless, his silhouette outlined by the pale moonlight filtering through the heavy drapes. One hand was tucked casually into his pocket, the other resting on the windowsill. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't moved. But he had been watching her. How long had he been there? The air snapped with tension. Her heart leapt into her throat. She tightened the towel instinctively, pulse hammering in her ears. He turned his head slowly, his eyes dragging over her with that unreadable expression. Part curiosity, part something else entirely. Something that made the space between them feel molten. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended, slicing through the thick silence like a blade. He didn't flinch. His gaze didn't drop. "This is my room," he said, low and unhurried. "Our room." Scarlet swallowed hard, refusing to take a step back, though her instincts screamed at her to retreat. "You could have knocked." Anthony's eyes darkened, the faintest smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. "And miss this?" he asked softly. The words hung between them like a dare. A flush crept up Scarlet's neck. The towel suddenly felt inadequate, fragile against the sheer weight of his gaze. Still, she didn't break. "You shouldn't be watching me." He shrugged, stepping closer, each movement fluid, predatory. "Then why did you walk in like that?" Her breath caught. The fire in her blood flared, not just with anger, not just with shame, but with something more dangerous. Something that had been simmering since the day she first laid eyes on him. She hated how he affected her, how effortlessly he could shatter the careful walls she'd built around her heart. "Don't pretend this is something it's not," she snapped, turning slightly away. He was in front of her in a second, closing. The distance, his hand reaching out, not touching, just hovering near her cheek. "And what is it, Scarlet?" he asked, his voice a whisper made of smoke and heat. Her throat went dry. He was close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body, the scent of cedar and something darker wrapping around her like an invisible tether. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the towel, knuckles white. "This is a contract," she said. Nothing more. Anthony's eyes searched hers, his expression unreadable. "Then why do you look at me like that?" "Like what?" she whispered. "Like, you're drowning and I'm the only air you can find." The words sent a tremor down her spine. She hated him for saying it, because it was true. And he knew it. Scarlet stepped back, needing space, needing clarity. But his presence was like gravity. Every step away only made her feel more unmoored. "You're not my air," she said. "You're the storm I got caught in." A pause, then a low, humorless chuckle from Anthony. "Maybe, but that doesn't mean you don't want to be swept away." Scarlet turned her face away, the towel slipping slightly, and he noticed. His gaze flicked downward, then back up to meet hers. And for the first time, the tension cracked. Not in anger, but in something raw, almost vulnerable. "You make this harder than it has to be," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "That's because I didn't choose this." A silence followed, deeper than before. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them standing at the edge of something dangerous. Too close to desire, too far from trust. His hand dropped to his side. Her grip on, the towel loosened slightly, her fingers trembling. And then, Anthony spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You're right. You didn't choose this, but neither did I." Scarlet blinked, stunned by the quiet honesty of it. He stepped back, finally, retreating to the window. "Get dressed," he said, voice clipped now, reined in. "Dinner is in 20 minutes. Then, he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving only silence, and the ghost of heat in the air where his breath had almost touched her skin. Scarlet stood frozen for a long moment, the weight of what just happened pressing against her chest. Desire and duty, they were two blades, both sharp, and she was walking the edge between them. But how long before one would cut too deep? Was it possible to keep resisting when part of her was starting to hope? In the shadowed alcove of a forgotten corridor, the air shifted into a charged stillness, as Scarlet and Anthony found themselves alone. The world outside, the expectations, the contracts, the oppressive weight of duty, faded into the background. In that secret space, time became a slow, pulsing rhythm, each beat echoing with the promise of something forbidden yet achingly beautiful. Their eyes met first, and in that gaze, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. A forbidden desire kindled in the depths of a shared torment. Anthony reached out, his hand trembling as it brushed against the soft curve of Scarlet's cheek. The contact was electric, a warmth that spoke of passion, yet also carried the chill of betrayal. In that forbidden touch, both felt an undeniable gravity, drawing them together even as their hearts screamed of the cost. Scarlet's pulse quickened as his fingertips traced delicate patterns along her skin. Every caress ignited a blaze of desire that threatened to consume her, even as a bitter reminder of her shattered past whispered through her veins. The sensations were conflicting, an intoxicating blend of warmth and cold, pleasure and pain. She closed her eyes, trying to surrender to the heat of the moment while the ghost of their doomed arrangement loomed in every shadow. Anthony's voice, low and laden with an urgency that was both tender and raw, broke the silence. "Scarlet," he murmured, his tone as soft as velvet yet edged with desperation. "For a moment, forget the world. Forget the promises that bind us." His words, a delicate incantation, stirred something deep within her. A flicker of hope amid despair. A spark of defiance against the fate that had been imposed upon them. Her response was a whispered plea, laden with a blend of longing and sorrow. "I want to, Anthony. But every touch, every word reminds me of the betrayal. Of the life I never chose." The admission was fragile, like a broken petal clinging to a thorn, yet it resonated with the raw intensity of truth. For an eternity compressed into a single heartbeat, they stood suspended between desire and duty. Then, as if surrendering to the inevitable pull of their shared defiance, Anthony closed the gap between them. His lips found hers in a kiss that was both fierce and fleeting. A collision of passion that shattered the delicate balance of their restrained lives. The kiss was not gentle. It was a raw, unfiltered expression of every hidden emotion, every stolen moment of rebellion. It was as if, in that single act, they could erase the scars of their past and momentarily rewrite their destiny. The sensation of his kiss was overwhelming. Warmth flooded her senses as the bitterness of betrayal was momentarily drowned by the ardor of their embrace. Yet, amid the surge of pleasure, there was a cold undercurrent that reminded them both of the inevitable consequences of this union. Scarlet's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder that while their passion burned bright, it was fated to be extinguished by the relentless forces of duty and expectation. In the depths of that forbidden intimacy, their bodies moved, in a synchrony that was as natural as the rhythm of the tides. Anthony's hands roamed over Scarlet's form with an urgency that spoke of pent-up frustrations and unspoken apologies. A desire to claim, to be claimed, in a moment that defied the rules of their predetermined world. Her fingers tangled in his hair, and together they surrendered to the transient ecstasy of a connection that was as dangerous as it was exquisite. Every touch, every gasp, was a prayer against the crushing weight of their reality, a desperate plea to hold on to the fleeting fragments of freedom that this moment granted. Yet, even as their passion surged, a part of Scarlet's soul remained in shadow, a cold, distant echo of all that she had lost. The exquisite pain of their union was both a balm and a brand, a reminder that with every stolen kiss, the chasm between desire and duty widened, threatening to swallow them whole. In the quiet aftermath of their embrace, as their lips slowly parted and their eyes sought solace in the depths of each other's gaze, a bittersweet silence enveloped them. The room, dimly lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, seemed to hold its breath, caught between the lingering warmth of their passion and the impending chill of reality. Scarlet's mind raced with a single, haunting question that lingered in the charged air. Was this forbidden touch a momentary escape from the chains of their fate, or had it irrevocably sealed their doom? The intensity of their passion promised nothing more than a brief interlude, a spark in the darkness that would soon be smothered by the harsh light of duty and the relentless march of time. In that poignant pause, as the echoes of their heartbeat mingled with the quiet hum of the room, both knew that the beauty of this stolen moment was as ephemeral as it was forbidden. And as they reluctantly parted, their eyes locked in a silent vow of unspoken rebellion, the lingering taste of desire and betrayal left them yearning for more of the elusive freedom that lay just beyond the grasp of their predetermined lives. Scarlet's heart raced as the echo of their forbidden embrace still reverberated in her mind. The quiet intimacy of the earlier moments had shattered, replaced by a storm of anxiety and fear. Every beat of her heart pounded in sync with her frantic thoughts, each one a reminder that nothing in her world was ever truly hidden. Now, as the weight of their secret pressed in on her like an avalanche, the looming threat of exposure became impossible to ignore. Her skin prickled with the chill of dread. Scarlet's mind spun with the implications of that stolen moment, a moment that should have been theirs alone, but now threatened to unravel everything she had fought so hard to keep under lock and key. Every whispered memory of their touch was interlaced with a foreboding knowledge. If anyone discovered what had transpired, the delicate balance of power that had held her captive for so long would shatter, leaving her vulnerable to forces far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. As she staggered away from the bedroom's secret alcove, her thoughts raced in an unending loop. Images of Anthony's smoldering gaze, the electric warmth of his kiss, and the unspoken promises that had passed between them. Yet, layered beneath those memories, was the icy certainty that the world around her was not blind. In the corridors of the fortress, secrets were currency, and every whispered conversation, every knowing glance, could be the thread that unraveled her carefully constructed facade. Before Scarlet could drown herself in the tumult of her racing thoughts, her phone vibrated sharply, a sudden, invasive interruption. The screen lit up with a caller ID she dreaded above all others. With a sinking feeling, she answered, her voice trembling as she greeted the call. It was Sarah. "Scarlet, darling, where are you?" Sarah's tone was deceptively sweet, laced with a calm that belied the razor-edged manipulation behind her words. There was an almost musical cadence in her voice, each syllable designed to charm and disarm, yet carrying an undercurrent of threat. Scarlet's grip tightened on the phone as she fought to steady her racing pulse. I'm in my room," she managed, her voice barely more than a whisper, heavy with the weight of guilt and fear. A soft, almost mocking laugh drifted through the line. "Oh, my dear, you always find such fascinating places to hide. But no secrets have a way of unraveling when you least expect them." Sarah's words danced on the edge of menace. "I trust you're not planning on letting our little indiscretion become public knowledge? After all, you wouldn't want to ruin everything, would you?" The call sent a chill racing down Scarlet's spine. Sarah's insinuations were clear. If her secret, that tender yet dangerous liaison, were exposed, the carefully maintained equilibrium of her world would collapse. Her mind spun with the stakes. This wasn't merely about a stolen kiss. It was about the potential ruin of every carefully guarded secret, the loss of any remaining control over her destiny. Desperation mingled with defiance as Scarlet tried to steady her thoughts. "Sarah, "What do you want from me?" she asked, forcing calm into her tone, though her hands trembled visibly. "Oh, nothing too extravagant," Sarah purred, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Just a little assurance that you know your place, and that you'll keep certain details to yourself. We wouldn't want our dear Anthony to think you're overstepping, would we?" The words were a calculated reminder of the power Sarah wielded, a subtle threat wrapped in the guise of friendly advice. "Remember, dear, in our world, everything has a price. And sometimes, the cost of a secret can be far more than you're willing to pay." Scarlet's heart sank as the implications settled over her like a shroud. Sarah's call was a stark reminder that the intimate encounter was not just a private moment of passion. It was a spark that could ignite a conflagration, one that might consume everything she had ever known. The room around her blurred as she clutched the phone tighter, the rhythmic sound of her breathing mingling with the distant hum of the fortress's ancient corridors. Every passing second amplified the dread that perhaps her secret was already slipping away, threatening to bring her world crashing down. Her thoughts raced, a desperate, disjointed litany. If this gets out, what will happen? Will Anthony turn on me? Will the pack see me as a liability, a weak link in their chain of power? The uncertainty was paralyzing. The promise of forbidden passion had been a temporary reprieve, a momentary break from the relentless chains of duty, but now it loomed as a potential disaster, a revelation that could shatter the very foundation of her existence. As Sarah's call lingered in the background, Scarlet felt an overwhelming need to protect herself. The stakes were monumental. Her secret was not just a matter of personal betrayal. It was a linchpin in the delicate balance of power that controlled her life. Every syllable from Sarah had reinforced the truth that one misstep could unravel everything. Her reputation, her autonomy, her very identity. In that suffocating moment, with the voice of her manipulator echoing in her ear, Scarlet's mind churned with a single unyielding question. Could she ever contain the storm within? Or was her secret destined to become the ruin of all that she had so desperately tried to preserve? In the stillness of a rain-washed evening, Scarlet wandered the quiet corridors of her room, her thoughts heavy with the weight of secrets and sorrow. It was then, as if guided by an unseen force, that her trembling fingers brushed against something small and unexpected. A delicate object, partially concealed beneath a stack of old papers. Her heart skipped a beat as she carefully lifted the object, revealing a slender silver bracelet that glinted softly in the muted light. It was the very bracelet that had once been a cherished keepsake, a symbol of her mother's love, and of a past that had defined who she was long before duty and betrayal had reshaped her fate. The bracelet was exquisite in its simplicity. Its chain, thin yet resilient, held a small pendant etched with a tiny red heart, a design that had always spoken to Scarlet with silent promises of love, loss, and hope. In that moment, the bracelet was not merely an ornament. It was a key, a tangible piece of her identity that she had long feared was lost forever. The cool metal against her skin stirred memories of a time when she believed in warmth and tenderness, when the world had not yet been corrupted by the relentless demands of power and control. Beneath the bracelet, a folded sheet of paper caught her eye, a sketch meticulously drawn, its edges frayed with time. As she unfolded the paper with cautious reverence, her eyes widened at the sight of a handwritten note scrawled in elegant, looping script. The note was a revelation. It spoke of a mystery, a search, and most startlingly, a confession of sorts. The words revealed that Anthony, the formidable alpha whose presence had always been both a promise and a prison, had been searching for her. The note explained that the bracelet was not just a relic of her past. It was the key to unlocking the connection between them, a beacon that had guided him through the labyrinth of his own tormented heart. A surge of conflicting emotions washed over Scarlet. For a long time, she had believed that the bracelet was nothing more than a remnant of a painful history, a token to be hidden away in the depths of her memory. Now, This revelation threatened to upend everything. The note's message was delicate and suspenseful, each word imbued with a longing that resonated with her own hidden desires. Anthony's search, it seemed, had been as relentless as it was secret, a quest driven by a deep, unspoken connection that spanned years of silence and separation. Her mind raced as she examined the delicate lines of the sketch. It depicted a scene of intertwined fates, a figure reaching out in desperation, a symbol of hope etched amidst swirling shadows. The imagery was both haunting and beautiful, echoing the very essence of what she had lost, and perhaps what she might still reclaim. The realization struck her with the force of a revelation. Anthony had not merely been a distant figure of authority, but a man who, despite his cold exterior, had been drawn inexorably to the remnants of her true self. The bracelet, with its unassuming elegance, had become a silent call, a guiding light in a sea of darkness. In that quiet moment of discovery, Scarlet felt as though time had slowed to a crawl. The gentle patter of rain against the window, the soft rustle of the paper in her hands, and even the faint hum of the distant city outside, all coalesced into a symphony of introspection. The bracelet and the note together whispered of a future that might be different from the one dictated by contracts and duty. They spoke of a possibility, a chance that the past, with all its scars and lost promises, might yet illuminate a path forward. Her thoughts turned inward, each memory a delicate thread in the tapestry of her existence. Can this lost piece of my past light the way forward? The question echoed softly in her mind, carrying with it both hope and uncertainty. It was a query that struck at the core of her identity, a plea for a future where she might reclaim the essence of who she once was, free from the chains of manipulation and forced destiny. The revelation stirred a quiet defiance within her, a determination that perhaps she need not be defined solely by the tragedies and betrayals of her history. The bracelet, now clutched tightly in her hand, was more than an artifact. It was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of love and memory. It held the promise that even in the darkest corridors of her existence, a fragment of light could still shine through, guiding her toward a future of her own making. As she sat there, bathed in the soft glow of a lone lamp, Scarlet allowed herself a moment of fragile hope. The weight of her secret, the burden of her past, seemed a little lighter now, as if the revelation had cracked open a door in her heart that she had long thought sealed shut. And as she gazed at the intricate design of the bracelet and the tender script of the note, she could not help but wonder, could this lost piece of her past truly be the key to rewriting her destiny? The dining hall was transformed into a stage for unspoken truths, its grandeur now marred by the storm of raw emotions that had erupted among its guests. Under the soft glow of ornate chandeliers, the rich, polished wood of the table gleamed like a silent witness to the impending confrontation. Anthony stood at the head of the table, his dark eyes scanning the gathered crowd with an intensity that promised no mercy. The atmosphere was heavy, each breath laden with anticipation and dread. Then, in a moment that shattered the veneer of composed formality, Anthony's voice cut through the murmurs of polite conversation. "Who is the rightful owner of this bracelet?" he demanded, holding the delicate silver band up for all to see. His words, sharp and unyielding, rippled through the room like a sudden gust of wind. The bracelet, a simple piece of jewelry with a tiny red heart, had long been a symbol of Scarlet's hidden past, a relic she had kept close to her heart in secret. A ripple of whispers swept through the dining hall as eyes darted between Anthony and Scarlet, whose expression was a complex tapestry of shock, defiance, and sorrow. The silence that followed his accusation was thick, punctuated only by the low hum of tension that seemed to resonate from the very walls. Scarlet's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the fragile secret now laid bare before everyone. Her voice, when it came, was barely a murmur. "It belongs to me," she said, her words laced with both vulnerability and a spark of defiance. Yet, as soon as the statement left her lips, it was met with a series of accusatory stares and barely concealed smirks from family members seated around the table. Sarah's eyes, cold and calculating, flashed with vindictive satisfaction. "Oh, dear Scarlet," she drawled, her tone dripping with feigned sympathy. "Are you sure about that? You know how precious such a symbol can be to our family legacy." Her words were both an insinuation and a threat, a reminder that secrets were currency in this tightly controlled world. The air grew even heavier as Bruce, Scarlet's father, leaned forward, his expression conflicted. "We must all know the truth," he said slowly, his voice measured, as if every syllable was weighed before being uttered. "This bracelet has been in our family for generations. Its true ownership is not something to be taken lightly." His eyes, filled with a mixture of regret and duty, fell upon Scarlet, silently pleading for an explanation. For a long, excruciating moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the soft clinking of cutlery and the low murmur of the other pack members, as if the very hall was holding its breath. Scarlet's thoughts whirled chaotically. Memories of whispered promises, of a past that had been carefully hidden away, and of the secret that now threatened to upend everything she had built. I found it," Scarlet finally managed, her voice trembling. "It was with my things, a relic of the past that I thought was lost." The words, delivered in a hushed, almost defeated tone, did little to dispel the palpable tension. Every eye in the room turned toward her, searching for clues in the flicker of her gaze and the tremor in her hands. Anthony's gaze was piercing as he interjected, "And what does that say about you, Scarlet? That you hide parts of yourself? That you carry secrets that might change everything?" His tone was both accusatory and pained, as if he were battling his own emotions even as he demanded answers. The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. As the confrontation deepened, family secrets began to unravel like frayed threads. Accusations spilled forth, of hidden loyalties, of a life carefully manipulated, and of betrayals that had been masked by the facade of duty. Each sentence that fell from the lips of those gathered was a blow, a reminder that in this world, even the smallest piece of personal history could become a weapon. Scarlet's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she struggled to maintain her composure. Her voice, when it emerged again, was stronger, yet laced with a profound sorrow. "This bracelet is a part of me, a reminder of my mother and the love I once believed in," she declared, each word deliberate and heavy with meaning. "It is not merely a symbol of our family legacy, but a key to who I am. And if you wish to question that, then you question everything about us." A charged silence fell over the room. The gravity of her words resonated in the eyes of everyone present, from the calculating glances of the pack members to the troubled expression on Bruce's face. It was as if the truth, long concealed beneath layers of control and manipulation, had finally broken free, exposing vulnerabilities that no one could ignore. In that final, heart-stopping moment, the dining hall seemed to hold its breath. Every accusation, every confession, every unresolved secret hung suspended in the air, a fragile, shimmering web of truth waiting to snap. As Scarlet's voice faded into the heavy silence, one question remained echoing in the charged atmosphere. How would these revelations reshape everything? And what price would she pay for daring to reclaim her identity in a world built on secrets and control? In the oppressive silence of the dining hall, with every eye fixed upon her, Scarlet's defenses finally crumbled. The charged air, heavy with unresolved accusations and whispered secrets, pressed in around her as she inhaled deeply, a breath meant to steel her resolve. But now, with her world teetering on the brink of irrevocable change, She knew there was no escaping the truth any longer. Her voice, initially a tremulous murmur, began to rise in a cadence of raw, unfiltered confession. I have a secret. She started, each syllable sharp as a shard of broken glass. The room fell into an even deeper silence as she continued, her eyes brimming with tears that glistened in the dim light. I sold my body. For money. The words, stark and unforgiving, cut through the stillness like a knife. For a heartbeat, time seemed to shatter. The revelation hung in the air, a brutal admission that obliterated every illusion Scarlet had painstakingly maintained. The once familiar murmur of the crowd transformed into a collective gasp of disbelief and horror. Bruce's face drained of color, his eyes wide with a mixture of heartbreak and betrayal. Even Anthony, whose countenance had been an enigma of calculated control, now faltered as the truth seared across his features. Scarlet's confession was not an act of defiance but of desperate honesty. Her voice, raw and tremulous, recounted the darkest chapter of her past, a time when survival had forced her to make unthinkable choices. I was young, and I had no other way out. I sold myself because I was desperate. Each word was laden with regret and shame, a heavy burden that had haunted her every step. As the words spilled forth, the carefully constructed facade of her controlled life crumbled, revealing the fragile, vulnerable truth beneath. The immediate fallout was instantaneous and devastating. Family members recoiled as if struck by an unseen force. The weight of her revelation shattered the carefully maintained order of the pack. Sarah's eyes, once filled with cold calculation, now flickered with a hint of pity mingled with scorn. In that moment, her false concern dissolved into disdain, an unspoken judgment that cut deeper than any spoken word. Bruce's hands, which had once offered silent support, now trembled with grief and disbelief as he struggled to comprehend the enormity of what she had confessed. Accusations and harsh whispers began to ripple through the hall. "How could you hide this?" one voice demanded, while another whispered, "This changes everything." Scarlet's heart ached with each murmur, each stinging look that now defined the room. Her darkest secret, one she had carried alone for so long, now lay bare before everyone, an irreversible fracture in the foundation of her world. The emotional climax reached a fever pitch as Scarlet's confession opened floodgates of long-suppressed pain and sorrow. Tears streamed down her cheeks, each drop a testament to the years of isolation and the burden of her hidden past. The room was a tapestry of raw emotions, shock, heartbreak, and a profound sense of loss mingled with the bitter taste of betrayal. The fragile bonds that had once tied her to her family were now in tatters, irreparably damaged by the truth. In that charged moment, Scarlet felt as if she were standing at the edge of a vast chasm, a place where the past and the present collided with explosive force. The world she had known, built on illusions and half-truths, had been shattered in an instant. The realization was as crushing as it was liberating. The secret that had haunted her was now out in the open, and nothing could ever restore the innocence of a life unburdened by such darkness. Yet, even as despair threatened to engulf her, a subtle, almost imperceptible glimmer of possibility began to stir in the depths of Scarlet's soul. The raw intensity of her admission, though filled with anguish, also bore the faint scent of redemption. It was as if, in unburdening herself of the lie she had lived for so long, she might finally pave a path toward reclaiming her true self. The possibility that acknowledging her past could be the first step in healing whispered to her in a soft, almost hopeful cadence, a promise that perhaps not all was lost. As the echoes of her confession slowly faded into a charged, lingering silence, the dining hall was left trembling in uncertainty. The weight of Scarlet's truth hung heavily in the air, its reverberations reshaping every relationship, every future plan. And as she stood there, Amid the ruins of illusions and the fracture lines of broken trust, a single haunting question resonated in the minds of all who witnessed the moment. Can the shattering of one's deepest secrets ever truly lead to redemption? Or is the price of truth an unending descent into despair? In the heavy silence that followed Scarlet's earth-shattering confession, the dining hall was shrouded in a profound stillness, a silence that was suddenly broken by the soft, unexpected sound of footsteps approaching. Her heart pounded as the weight of her words hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, teetering on the brink of shattering completely. Then, from the gathering gloom emerged her father, Bruce, his face etched with sorrow, pain, and something else. A deep, enduring love that had weathered the storms of their troubled past. Without a word, Bruce crossed the space between them, his movements deliberate yet tender. In an instant, he enveloped Scarlet in his arms, a gesture so unexpected and genuine that it momentarily quieted the murmurs of shock and judgment from those around them. His embrace was warm and protective, a silent declaration that despite the betrayal, despite the secrets that had come to light, his love for her remained unbroken. In that moment, time seemed to slow, each heartbeat a gentle drum affirming that family, even in its most complicated form, could offer solace in the face of despair. Scarlet clung to her father as if he were the only anchor in a storm-tossed sea. The rough lines of his weathered face softened as he murmured comforting words that were almost lost amid the quiet tension. "My dear, you are still my child," he whispered, his voice a soothing balm that began to mend the raw edges of her wounded spirit. His arms, strong yet tender, wrapped around her in a gesture that transcended all the accusations and painful confessions. For a fleeting moment, the dining hall's harsh lights and cold stares faded into insignificance, replaced by the comforting cocoon of unconditional love. Around them, the reactions were as varied as the emotions that now swirled in the charged atmosphere. Some faces, previously shrouded in veiled disapproval, now showed hints of regret, an acknowledgement that their harsh judgments had been misguided. Others remained silent, their expressions unreadable as they processed the raw vulnerability displayed before them. Even Sarah's cold, calculating eyes softened ever so slightly, as if the tender spectacle of a father's embrace challenged her long-held convictions about control and manipulation. It was in this fragile moment that the true essence of family revealed itself, a mosaic of emotions, where pain and love coexisted in an intricate dance. For Scarlet, her father's unexpected embrace was both a salve and a bittersweet reminder of all that had been lost. Every tear that escaped her eyes carried the heavy burden of years spent concealing the truth, of the lies that had once promised protection, but instead wrought isolation. And yet, in Bruce's arms, she felt a glimmer of hope, a reassurance that even when the past shatters the present, there remains the possibility of healing through love. His touch was a quiet affirmation that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It was an open door through which the light of redemption could one day enter. As the embrace lingered, Scarlet allowed herself a moment to reflect on the paradox of her existence. Here she was, exposed and raw, her darkest secret laid bare for all to see, yet in the depth of her father's unconditional love, she discovered an unexpected sanctuary. It was as though the brutal confessions had peeled away the layers of pretense and fear, leaving behind a core that was at once fragile and resilient. In that moment of stillness, she realized that the strength to endure did not come from hiding behind lies or clinging to carefully constructed facades. It sprang from the courage to be truly seen, imperfections and all. The dining hall, once filled with the tumult of accusations and whispered judgments, gradually began to settle into a heavy, reflective silence. Conversations died down, replaced by thoughtful glances and quiet introspection. Even Anthony's intense gaze softened, as if he too recognized that beneath the tumult of duty and betrayal, there lay the potential for redemption. The air was now tinged with a gentle melancholy, a shared understanding that though wounds might never fully heal, the act of exposing one's deepest pain was a critical step toward eventual wholeness. In that tender aftermath, Scarlet clung to her father's embrace as if to hold on to the promise of unconditional love. Amid the gentle reassurances, she felt a stirring of resolve, a recognition that vulnerability, painful though it was, might also be the source of profound strength. As Bruce slowly released her, his eyes met hers with a silent promise that, together, they would navigate the murky waters of their fractured family. In the fading echoes of that bittersweet moment, Scarlet's thoughts drifted to the future. She wondered quietly and introspectively whether the act of laying her soul bare could be the beginning of a long, arduous journey toward self-forgiveness and renewal. Could the truth, however painful, ultimately pave the way for a healing that would allow her to reclaim her identity? The charged silence that followed left the audience, and perhaps even Scarlet herself, pondering one undeniable truth. Within the shattered remains of illusions, there exists a profound, transformative power, a reminder that true strength is often found in the courage to be vulnerable. Under the soft glow of twilight, the fortress's grand hall transformed once more into a sacred space, a stage set not for a binding contract, but for a renewal of vows that promised something deeper. Tonight, amid the lingering echoes of past betrayals and unspoken regrets, Anthony stepped forward with a resolve that defied the harsh confines of their predetermined fate. The ornate hall, draped in elegant fabrics and illuminated by the gentle radiance of crystal chandeliers, bore witness to a pivotal moment of transformation, a public declaration that transcended the cold terms of a contract. Standing at the center of the hall, Anthony's presence was both commanding and tender. His dark eyes, usually shrouded in the severity of duty, now glimmered with a warmth that belied the rigid exterior he was known for. In a voice that resonated with both authority and quiet vulnerability, he spoke clearly. "Scarlet, tonight, I renew my vows, not out of obligation, but from a heart that has learned to love you despite all that has been forced upon us." His words, both triumphant and wistful, rippled through the gathered crowd, stirring a murmur of mixed emotions among the pack members and family alike. For Scarlet, the announcement struck her like a sudden burst of light through a heavy fog. Every scar on her soul, every memory of isolation and pain, seemed to shimmer with the possibility of redemption. Her eyes, glistening with tears that spoke of both relief and lingering sorrow, met his. In that fleeting glance, a silent promise passed between them, a vow that, despite the contractual nature of their union, there was a space where genuine love might flourish. It was as if Anthony's voice had reached the depths of her guarded heart, gently urging it to awaken from a long, numbing slumber. The renewal ceremony unfolded with a measured grace. The traditional rituals, once a source of oppressive formality, now took on a new, almost ethereal significance. As Anthony repeated his vows, each carefully chosen word carried the weight of a burden lifted, a promise of change that was both public and profoundly personal. His declaration was not just a reaffirmation of duty. It was a bold, yet tender admission that love, even when marred by the scars of a shattered past, could be resilient. Around them, the room was alive with a spectrum of emotions. Some faces, hardened by years of loyalty to unyielding rules, now softened with the gentle glow of hope. Others, still entrenched in skepticism, exchanged furtive glances that betrayed an inner turmoil. Even Sarah, whose icy demeanor had once been a constant threat, now observed from afar with an expression that hinted at reluctant admiration. In that charged atmosphere, every whispered word and lingering gaze underscored the significance of the moment. A public turning point where the constraints of a contract were momentarily set aside in favor of a promise that transcended legal bindings. Scarlet's own voice, though quivering at first, grew steadier as she spoke her reply. "Anthony," she began softly, the name a balm and a spark all at once. "I never imagined that vows, once merely ink on paper, could transform into something that heals. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of years spent, in quiet rebellion against a life she never chose. In that moment, her declaration was not just for him, but for herself, a step toward reclaiming the shattered pieces of her identity. As the vows were exchanged, the atmosphere in the grand hall shifted. The festive music that had once buoyed the contract wedding now took on a new, bittersweet tone, an ode to hope emerging from a field of scars. The soft murmur of the assembled crowd seemed to echo a collective question. Could true love, forged in the crucible of betrayal and hardship, mend a heart so deeply wounded? In the final moments of the ceremony, as Anthony and Scarlet's hands intertwined in a gentle, unspoken promise, the room fell into a reflective hush. The gentle strains of a violin filled the space, weaving a delicate tapestry of sound that resonated with both triumph and lingering melancholy. In that charged silence, every soul present felt the palpable tension between duty and desire, between the inevitability of the past and the hope for a future that might yet be rewritten. The renewal of vows was not merely a ceremonial act. It was a defiant stand against the forces that had once bound them. It was a quiet revolution, a testament to the resilience of the human heart, and a fragile beacon of light in an otherwise dark world. Yet, even as the celebration swelled around them, a subtle question lingered in the air, a whisper among the day, clinking glasses and soft smiles of onlookers. Can true love, born of both passion and pain, truly mend a shattered heart? Or will the scars of betrayal forever dictate the course of our fate? In that open, uncertain moment, as the echoes of renewed vows mingled with the hope and despair of all present, the future remained unwritten, an endless canvas awaiting the brushstrokes of a love that dared to defy destiny. As the final echoes of renewed vows dissolved into the warm air of the grand hall, a collective sigh of relief and cautious hope rippled through the gathered crowd. The tension that had gripped the room melted into a bittersweet triumph, a celebration that, despite its public display of unity, whispered of private battles yet to be won. Scarlet stood at the center, her hand still entwined with Anthony's, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears that spoke of sorrow and newfound strength. In that moment, the past's heavy chains seemed to recede, replaced by a fragile promise of a future where love might finally transcend its scars. The applause was gentle but fervent, a chorus of voices that, for a fleeting moment, washed away the echoes of betrayal and heartache. Even the once stern faces of the pack members softened as they bore witness to this unlikely reconciliation. A public triumph that masked the secret personal journey of transformation that Scarlet had only just begun. The music, now soft and reflective, played like a lullaby of hope amid the lingering notes of grief and uncertainty. Amid the subdued celebration, Scarlet's gaze shifted toward Victor. He stood at the edge of the assembly, his presence steady and reassuring as ever. In his eyes, she found a quiet acknowledgement, a silent communication that went beyond words. Victor's subtle nod and the gentle tilt of his head were laden with significance. They spoke of shared secrets and unspoken promises, of the understanding that sometimes triumph is not measured solely by public acclaim, but by the strength to forge a new path from the remnants of the old. His gaze, tender yet resolute, reminded her that while the ceremony marked an end, it also signified the birth of an inner odyssey toward self-acceptance and freedom. Inside, Scarlet felt a quiet metamorphosis unfolding. The public ceremony had been a necessary performance, a moment to mask the lingering shadows of her past with the radiant veneer of a new beginning. But within her, the journey was just starting. Each heartbeat carried the weight of both regret and the resolute hope for redemption. Every memory of pain was slowly being recast as a lesson, every tear a symbol of strength rather than surrender. In the public eye, she was now a bride reborn. In her private heart, she was an individual emerging from a long, dark night, determined to reclaim her narrative. The conversations around her were hushed and reflective, filled with subtle exchanges that carried as much weight as any spoken word. A few kind smiles and nods from friends and relatives spoke of shared resilience, while whispered comments in the corridors hinted at the long road ahead, one that would test the mettle of even the bravest soul. Yet, for Scarlet, these gentle affirmations were like soft brushstrokes painting the contours of a life reimagined. The burden of her past, once a crushing weight, now began to feel like the foundation upon which she could build something new, something authentic. As the crowd slowly dispersed into the cool evening air, the grand hall retained a lingering glow, as if the space itself was holding on to the essence of that bittersweet moment. Scarlet and Anthony, hand in hand, stepped out into the twilight. The gentle murmur of voices outside was replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of nocturnal life, a serene backdrop that underscored the delicate balance between triumph and melancholy. Scarlet paused for a moment at the threshold, gazing upward at the vast expanse of the night sky. The stars, scattered like shards of silver on a velvet canvas, seemed to whisper promises of a new dawn. In that reflective pause, the overwhelming realization struck her. While the public ceremony had signified a union defined by duty, it also marked the opening of a new chapter in her inner journey. A journey that, though shadowed by past betrayals, was now illuminated by the possibility of genuine healing. The cool night air embraced her as she stepped forward, each step a declaration of her newfound resolve. The weight of the past was still there, a quiet echo in her mind, but it no longer held her captive. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far she had come and how much strength lay within her. The future, shrouded in uncertainty, yet tinged with hope, beckoned with the promise of redemption and self-discovery. In that charged, transformative moment, as the first hints of dawn began to edge the horizon, Scarlet's heart whispered one final, lingering question. Can true love, forged in the crucible of despair and tempered by the flames of betrayal, mend a shattered heart and light the way to a future where freedom and fulfillment are more than just distant dreams? The gentle glow of the approaching dawn painted the sky in hues of soft gold and rose, a visual symphony that resonated with both promise and wistfulness. As Scarlet took her first steps toward this new beginning, she carried within her the bittersweet triumph of the day, a testament to the enduring power of vulnerability, the quiet strength found in embracing one's scars, and the unwavering hope that even the most shattered hearts can find a way to heal. In the quiet aftermath of all that had transpired, as the final echoes of the ceremony and the weight of past betrayals faded into memory, Scarlet found herself standing on the threshold of a new beginning. The days that followed were gentle, yet relentless, each one an opportunity to heal, to rebuild, and to embrace a future that she had once thought unattainable. Time, like a soft river carving its way through ancient stone, began to mend the fractures in her heart. Scarlet spent many solitary mornings in quiet reflection, watching the sunrise over the horizon with a sense of wonder and cautious hope. The light, warm and persistent, reminded her that every new day brought a chance to redefine her life. She had learned that pain, no matter how deep, did not have to dictate the course of her future. With each sunrise, the memories of past hardships softened, their edges blurring until they became a part of the mosaic of her story. A story marked by both sorrow and the tender beauty of resilience. Her choices had forever altered the landscape of her life. The confessions, the confrontations, and even the forced vows had left scars, yet they also forged a strength within her that she had never before recognized. In embracing her darkest truths, Scarlet had discovered an inner light, quiet force that enabled her to accept her past without allowing it to consume her. Slowly, she learned to see her history not as a chain of regret, but as a series of lessons that had ultimately led her to a deeper understanding of herself. In the long, thoughtful hours of the evenings, Scarlet would sit by the window of her modest new dwelling, a space she had chosen with care, a sanctuary where memories of the fortress and the tumultuous days before were gently stored away. There, surrounded by the soft glow of twilight and the comforting rustle of wind through the trees, she allowed herself to dream once more, dreams that were no longer tainted by the bitterness of betrayal, but imbued with the promise of genuine love and self-acceptance. Her relationship with Anthony, though still complex and defined by the forces of duty and expectation, had begun to shift. Through many shared silences and honest, difficult conversations, a fragile bond of understanding was taking root, a bond that acknowledged the past without being enslaved by it. The public ceremonies and grand gestures had given way to quieter moments of connection, where both dared to glimpse a future in which their hearts might finally be free. It was in these tender, unscripted moments that Scarlet began to realize that true redemption might be found not in the perfection of external vows, but in the honesty of everyday actions. A soft word of comfort, a gentle touch, or the courage to simply be vulnerable. Yet, the road ahead was not without its lingering questions. Scarlet often found herself pondering, with a mixture of introspection and hope, the nature of love itself. Can the scars of a shattered past ever fully heal? Is it possible for a heart, marked by betrayal and loss, to learn to love unconditionally again? In the quiet recesses of her mind, these questions danced like fragile reflections on a still pond, beautiful, elusive, and deeply personal. And while she did not have all the answers, she had learned to embrace the uncertainty as part of the journey towards self-discovery. Now, as seasons changed and time gently wove new patterns into the tapestry of her life, Scarlet took tentative steps toward a future where love, in its truest form, might one day mend her wounds. The promise of this future was like the soft murmur of a distant song, an invitation to trust that even after the darkest storms, there could be a moment of serene, unburdened peace. Looking back, she saw that every hardship, every heartache, had brought her to this precipice of renewal. Her journey had been long and fraught with pain, yet it had also been rich with growth and the dawning realization that vulnerability is not a weakness, but the very core of human strength. In embracing her past, its beauty and its brutality, Scarlet had forged a path to a future where her identity was no longer defined solely by the wounds of yesterday, but by the resilient hope of tomorrow. As she gazed out at a sky painted with the soft hues of dusk, Scarlet allowed herself a quiet, hopeful smile. The night whispered promises of new beginnings, of love that could heal, and of a life reclaimed from the shadows of obligation. In that reflective, serene moment, she posed one final, lingering question, not just to herself, but to all who had followed her journey. Can the delicate, enduring flame of true love truly mend a shattered heart and guide us into a future filled with the gentle light of hope and renewal? The question, suspended in the cool evening air, invited each listener to reflect on their own path, to consider the transformative power of embracing our vulnerabilities, and to dare to dream of a dawn where even the deepest scars may one day be kissed by the light of redemption.